Okay, before we get started with adding and subtracting negatives, what I want to do today is go back to this chart that I gave you yesterday when we talked about the types of numbers. And I want to clarify something. You notice that in the whole numbers, I told you that in the whole numbers and integers, we didn't get to fractions until we hit the rational numbers. So integers aren't supposed to have any fractions, and whole numbers are not supposed to have any fractions. So I want to clarify why, am I making you dizzy? I want to clarify why there are fractions there to make sure that you're not confused with what I told you yesterday. What I told you yesterday is correct, but our little diagram might be confusing. So on the whole numbers, you notice that there's a fraction here, but if you simplify that fraction, 8 divided by 2, and we found out in fractions this little sign means divide. We'll talk about that more when we get to the fractions section. But if you take 8 and divide it by 2, it becomes the whole number 4. So what we do is look at the simplified version of what is being given. And if it simplifies down to a whole number, it's not really a fraction. Do y'all see what I'm trying to tell you?
Yes.
The same is true up here on the integers. Remember that the integers can have positives and negatives, but they can't have fractions. That's what we talked about. Integers do not have fractions or decimals. But when you simplify this, that looks like a fraction, of course, when you simplify 9 divided by 3, it becomes the integer 3. And in this case, negative. We'll talk about negatives and positives today. That's what we're going to do. So do you understand why it's showing a fraction, but they're
Yes.
really not fractions when it comes to type of numbers? If it simplifies to a whole number, then it is a whole number. If it simplifies to a whole number, positive or negative, it's an integer. Everybody fine with that clarification?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. I didn't want there to be any confusion. So today, what we're going to do is talk about negatives and positives. The dreaded negatives and positives. Okay, I think that and fractions put more fear into students than anything else, even quadratics or anything like that. When you say fractions or word problems, okay, but we're going to clear up all of that for you. Now, today we're only going to talk about negatives and positives, and we're going to give you the rules and show you how to add, subtract, and if we have time, I'm going to go ahead and move into multiply and divide. Now, before we start, I want you to listen to me carefully. In the past, I have taught my students adding and subtracting negatives and positives and not said a word about multiplying and dividing till a lot later because they have different rules. Last time I taught this, I taught them together with a warning that you've got to separate the rules in your head. Okay? It seemed to work okay. I'm going to try it again with y'all. But what I need you to do is focus and get this in your head. There is going to be one set of rules to adding and subtracting or decimals and positives. Then there's another set of rules for multiplying and dividing. Completely different rules. We're going to talk about the add and subtract right now, and I will give you fair warning when we're going to switch over to a different set of rules. So whatever you need to do in your notes, you need to specify that we're going to be using different rules. Okay? That being said, I want to explain about negatives and positives. Here comes Mary. Yay. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Miss Deborah.
You doing okay this morning?
Yes, I'm fine. Thank you.
Good. I explained a little bit about the chart from the types of numbers from yesterday. I did a little clarification. So I want you to be sure and go to the YouTube and look at the very first part of this recording, okay?
Okay, yeah.
So you can get that information.
Thank
All
you.
right. We're talking about negatives and positives. And I just said that if we're going to add or subtract negatives, we have one set of rules. And if we multiply, and divide negatives and positives, completely set of rules. Okay, I'm going to give you the basics here. If we have a positive number, and the same number, but negative, these are called opposites. Now you can remember that because they have opposite signs. So if I have a -2 and a +2, notice that I put the positive here for you right now, but the positive usually doesn't show. Okay, if there's not a sign, then it's positive. So -2 and +2 are opposites. These are opposites because they're the same number, but opposite signs. No problems here?
No.
And I'm going to go ahead and show you, since we're here, that if we have, I have these little discs that I use in the classroom sometimes, and one side of the disc is a light color and the other side is a dark color. So what we do, if we're going to use those discs to try to find out an answer, then we use the light side of the disc to represent a positive and the dark side to represent a negative. Okay, so in this case, a -2 would be represented by 2 of these dark discs. And the +2, if I was going to represent it, would be the light side, 2 of them, 2 lights, 2 darks, okay? Now, the reason, I told you that this is opposite and you can memorize that it's opposite, but the reason they are opposite is because if you put them together, they're going to equal 0. Okay, if we put those together. Now, this is how it works if I'm just using the discs. And I'll show you this again. This is new. If I have a set of opposites, a positive and a negative, if I put those opposites together, I will create what we call a 0 pair. A 0 pair. And that means that they cancel each other out, one positive with a negative that matches. If I have those together, they create a 0 pair, okay? Which means that it's equal to 0, just like this, okay? So if I have opposites, I put those together, they become a 0 pair and cancel each other out, one negative, one positive. Does everybody understand this? Do you get this in your head?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to use this example when we begin to add and subtract negatives, which is next. And I'm going to show you how to do this with a rule, with the number line, and with these discs. So you can pick out the method that you want to use that will help you understand positives and negatives. So if anybody needs this, speak up. I'm going to have to erase to give me some room.
I wrote it all down.
Okay, so nobody needs it?
No, ma'am.
Now, you don't have a handout that says all of that, so if you missed it, go back to the YouTube video that I'll post later this morning. All right, now here we go. We're going to start with one problem that doesn't even deal with negatives at all. So we're going to do 2 plus 3. I'm going to show you all 3 methods. No, I'm going to show you the 2 methods. In the end, I'm going to tell you the rule. Okay, so the first method is going to be what we learned yesterday with the number line. Here's the 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then on the other side of the 0 is -1, -2, -3. And I would encourage you to remember how to number this, because some of the worksheets that I sent for you today, they're going to ask you which is larger, -2 or 1. -2 or 1, which is larger? Well, it sounds like the 2 should be larger, but because it's negative on the number line, the 1 is larger. Do you see? When it comes to negatives, it kind of switches around in your brain. So I'd encourage you to get very familiar with the number line, even though it looks very elementary to you. Okay, now, if we're going to use the number line to find out the answer to this problem, yesterday, this is where we start. I'm going to start right there. This says to go to the right. So I'm going to move this way 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. And so, of course, my answer is 5. All of you knew that anyway. But this is how we use the number line to find that answer. Now, if you need more explanation about that, go back to yesterday's video. We talked about that quite a bit. Now, if I'm going to use the little discs to explain this, 2 plus 3, then I know that 2 is positive because there's nothing out here. So it's an understood positive. So I'm going to use 2 positive discs to represent positive 2. Then when I get here, the plus goes, the sign is always on the left-hand side of the number. So this plus goes with that number. This plus goes with that number, which means that we have a positive 3 now. 1, 2, 3. Now, when I look at all those discs that are laying on my desk, I guess, are there any opposites? Is there a positive that matches a negative in here? No, say no. There are no opposites. If there were opposites, and we'll do that in the next problem, if there were opposites, then we would cross out a positive that matches a negative and take that away. But since there are no negatives to deal with here, then the answer that we see, we only count what's here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 discs, and they were all positive. So the answer is a positive 5. Now, these are the 2 different methods that you can use if you are a kinesthetic, which means you have to feel things and write things, okay, to understand them. This is a very good method to start to get in your head. Let's jump into the negatives. Let's do the same thing, only we're going to put a negative on the 2. Okay, so we're going to do -2 plus 3. Understand and remember that the sign to the left goes with the number. We need to be sure that you remember that all the way through this course. It's going to come in more important later. So here's our number line real quick. I always like to put 0 so I know where I am. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. -1, -2, -3, -4, blah, blah, blah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, in this case, we have learned that I start here. I start here at -2. Really wanted that to work. I start here at -2. I go in the positive direction, which is to the right, 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. And so my answer is 1, or I can put a positive there right now. You won't see it written on the test or anywhere else with the positive. It'll simply say 1, and you're supposed to know that's positive. So there's our number line method. Let's do the disk method. So I have -2 plus 3. And in this case, negative goes with the 2. So I have 2 dark disks because it's 2, but they're negative. So they're dark. Then the positive 3, I have 3 positives. 3 positives. Now, I don't know how many of you are thinking this, but you're thinking, am I going to be drawing circles my whole life? And no, you won't. If you do this for a while we're hitting the basics, you'll start to see this in your head. Okay, you'll start to see circles. I've had people that said they dream about it. Okay, so now, before we find the answer, we have to get rid of all of our opposites, or what we call 0 pairs, okay? So I have a negative and a positive here that match each other. So they're gone. I would erase them, but I want you to see it, okay? Now here's a negative that matches another positive, and so I have to take those out before I know what the answer is. Do you see any more 0 pairs? You
Nope.
take out,
No.
good. You take out all of the 0 pairs, and then what is left after you take out your 0 pairs is the answer. It's 1 and it's a positive, so +1. Same answer, different methods. Yes? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the rule. Those of you that like rules. If, let me just get me some room. If the signs are different, subtract. Okay, if the signs are different, it says to subtract 2 and 3. If you subtract 2 and 3, you get 1. And give the answer, the sign, I'm watching that wind outside, the sign of the largest looking number. So the rule is if the signs are different, which they are in this case, then you think subtract. We know if we subtract these, it's 1, but we don't know what the sign is yet. So you're going to give the answer the sign of the largest looking number. Well, the largest looking number is 3. So my answer is going to be a positive. Okay, if y'all like rules. There's the rest of it. Okay, if the signs are different. Now, I hope you have that down because it's not in any of your handout. Oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Now, if the signs are the same, like -2 minus 3, if the signs are the same, then add and give it that sign. So if both of them have a negative sign, then the answer is going to have a sign or negative sign. You just add them together. We'll do some more, but get this rule down because I'm going to erase and we're going to do some more.
And I can't see.
Who was that? Rachel?
Yes.
What did
I
you
got
say?
the same popped up in the screen.
You're getting it?
And I had a thing that popped up in the middle of my screen.
Oh, okay. So you're trying to get it down now or?
Yeah.
You actually, I saw yesterday that you printed out this sheet that has the rules on it. Okay. It's that colored one that I hand wrote. The rest of you should have it in your email. I sent it last night along with the worksheet packet. Now I'll explain these things that I send to you in the email. Yesterday, the email for the stuff tonight that we're going to practice has 13 pages. Okay. If you remember, it goes pretty quickly. The 13 pages sound freaky, but you know how well y'all did on yesterday's. So the 13 pages, and one of them, the 13th page, has these rules written on it. I was going to, whenever I send you worksheets in the mail or in the email, at the end of the name of the file, at the very end, it's in parentheses and it will say P1, P2, P3. That means that I'm going to staple my printouts in that order, okay? And so it helps if you will number your pages after you print them out. But if you look at the end of the file name where I send it to you, they will be numbered in parentheses, P1, P2, P3. The one with the rules on it, I don't think it has a page number. That will go in your general information section of your binder. Okay, so if you'll look at those file names, yes, there are the rules. Rachel's showing you what that printout looks like. I'll try to make
Okay,
it.
I was making sure this was it.
That's in your email today. Okay, let's do another one. Let's do two negatives. Let's do -2 plus, and they'll do this most of the time because these parentheses just are put there for clarification. It's kind of hard if you would see it like this. Okay, it might be more confusing. So they're saying -2 plus a -4. And the parentheses don't mean anything in this case except for clarification. So if we do the number line, we're going to do several methods. You all will be able to choose your own. You don't have to know everything. Okay, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So in this case, we learned yesterday, if we're going to use the number line, we start at -2. Start here. This, okay, now be careful. This tells you that we're going to move in a positive direction, yes? But then you hit this sign, which turns you back around and tells you to go in a left direction. You have to follow each sign. I'll show you a shortcut in a minute. The plus says, yes, we're going to move in this direction, but before you hit the 4, you hit a negative, which turns you around, says we're going to be moving to the left 4 places. 1, 2, 3, 4. So our answer in this case is a -6. -6. Now, if you want a shortcut, just don't get confused. A plus and a minus that are right together mean minus. If they're right next to each other, a plus and a minus means minus. And you can just circle that up and change the sign. Let's do the discs. In this case, the discs might be clearer about this problem. We have a -2 plus a -4. Now, in this case, negatives are the dark discs. So I have 2 of them. And -4 has 4 of them. Now, before I can put the answer, I have to look all the way through and see if there are any 0 pairs that I can take out. In this case, I don't have any positives that match negatives. I have nothing that I can cancel out. And so my answer would be to count up the discs. There are 6 of them. And they're all dark. So your answer is a -6. And choose to be a rule person. The rule is if the signs are the same, negative and negative, okay? If the signs are the same, then you add and give the sign that you're using. Negatives and negatives are negatives. Y'all see? Do all of you see a method that will be easy to do for a while? Out of the 3?
Yes, I do.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Or are you totally confused yet? Okay. Let's move on to another example. -7 minus a -2. These are the ones that people kind of get choked up on when they see all these silly negatives. Well, let's see if everything that we've done in the past holds true. Let's do the number line. And I have 0 here, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7, -8, -9. Okay. So if we use the very same method we've been using all along, then we know that we're going to start at the -7. We're going to start at the -7. Now, this is something you have not seen. Minus, we found out, means I'm going to go in a negative direction, right? I'm going to be moving to the left, but I immediately see another negative, which turns me around. And it says I'm really going to go to the right 2 places. 1, 2, and the answer to this is -5. Okay? Now, the shortcut Remember that if you had the plus and the minus right together, remember if we had the minus and the plus right together, we could circle that up and make it a minus. If you have two negatives, and you'll see this a lot. If you have two negatives right together like this, then you can circle that up and it makes a positive. So this is a positive. So you started at your -7, moved to the right 2 places. It works no matter how you do it. Let's look at the disk method. Okay. -7 minus -2 equals. So this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have to use the two negatives will become a +2. And so we have +2. Before we can find the answer, we have to get rid of the 0 pairs. Here's a positive that matches a negative. Here's a positive that matches a negative. Now, when we get rid of those, all we have left on the screen is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they are dark, so it's a negative answer. Everybody okay?
Yeah, I'm catching
Yeah.
up.
Is it about to drive you crazy? Okay. Now, I can stop here. I can stop here for today. It's going to be your choice. There are several of the papers, not the full packet, but several of the papers that will deal with adding and subtracting negatives. Would you feel more comfortable practicing just this? And then tomorrow we go to multiply and divide rules. What is the consensus here? I seriously need to hear.
Let's keep going.
Keep going, okay. I was going to tell you that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. The first 6 pages you'll be able to do on the handouts that I emailed to you yesterday. You'll be able to do the first 6 pages just with what I've told you today. Is everybody good?
Yes.
Okay.
Which
I'll
paper
tell-
was that?
Pardon?
Which paper was that?
I emailed it to you last night, so you may not have them yet, but they are in your email. Okay?
Okay.
And I know it's tough for you, Rachel. I know it is. The people that don't have a printer at home, but I don't know how else to do this. So
Okay.
you can shoot your email to Josie if you want, the one that I sent to you, and ask her if she will print those out for you. You'll have to go get them. That's the best I can do while I'm at home.
Okay.
If you don't have a
Okay.
printer. Okay.
Alrighty.
Let me get a drink. We'll start.
So,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. So if you say, well, the two positives make it, the two negatives makes it a positive.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And
So,
if you do that, you can ignore these. And then it's 7 plus 2. -7 plus 2. Go ahead.
okay. I want to subtract it for some reason.
You don't want to do what?
I want to subtract it. I don't know why.
Well,
I guess.
if you're using your rule, I didn't go ahead to the rule.
Okay.
If you're using the rule, it says if the signs are different, you think subtract in your head,
Yes.
and that is 5. But the big deal is what is the sign that I put on it? I put the sign that is on the larger looking number, which is 7. Okay. This doesn't mean this is the larger number because
Yes.
negatives and positives, whatever. But the larger looking number is 7. It has a negative on it. And so your answer will have a negative on it.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't go ahead and do the rule. Yes, you do think subtract, Sherry.
Okay.
Good point. Any questions? Okay. Oh, Sherry, I think it was coming. Was there
No.
another question, Sherry?
No, I'm okay.
All right. Now, I told you that I would warn you. Now I want you to lay down the rules for add and subtract because we are going a completely different direction for multiply and divide. Remember, the rules are totally separate and you've got to separate these in your head. The good news is they're easier for multiply and divide. Okay, add and subtract, you're going to have to think and practice. Multiply and divide, of course, you're going to have to practice, but they are easier. So I'm going to get another drink and I'm going to give you a second to prepare your minds and prepare your notes because we're going to change rules. We're not going to use the number lines. We're not going to use the discs. We're simply going to multiply. So let me go ahead and give you the rule. The rule for multiply and divide. If there are an even amount of negatives, answer is positive. Even is like 2 negatives, 4 negatives, you just count them. 8, even. If there are an even number of negatives in your problem, the answer is going to be positive all the time. If, and it's just the opposite. If there are an odd is 1, 3, 5, 7. If there are an odd number of negatives, answer is negative. And in multiply and divide, you just need to know the rule for the sign, because if you're multiplying, you just multiply. If you're dividing, you just divide. The sign is what you've got to work on. But this is total about what you do in divide and multiply. Now, I need you to get this down solid. The ones who didn't practice this in the past struggled when we started using this in different types of problems later on in the curriculum. You must practice. You must get this in your head. This is basic. Okay? Now, also, those of you that didn't get this written down or you need it on a piece of paper, it is in your email along with the 12 worksheets. It's page 13.
you.
And right now, you saw Rachel show it to us again.
I said thank you.
You what? You're
I was
laughing.
writing down, and you said it's in your email on page 13. I said, oh, thank you.
Oh, yay. Would you show everybody that page one more time? And this is a page that I would put in your general information with all your different charts at the beginning of your binder. It looks kind of like this. It's handwritten from last year. I may type one up that looks better, but for now, that's your resource. What, Sherry?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't say anything.
Oh, who was it that said something else?
I think somebody was clearing their throat.
Okay. All right, let's do a practice. We'll do several practices, but I'm not going to go any further today. I want you to understand what opposites are. We did that at the first. Opposites are same numbers with opposite signs, and they cancel each other out for a zero pair. They will refer to opposites and ask you about opposites on one of the worksheets. Okay, here's an example. Okay, you've seen multiply with the X. I'll probably use the asterisk because later on we'll be using X as a variable in our problems. And if we use an X for multiply and an X for the variable, it becomes confusing. So this means multiply. So if I have 3 times 4, of course we all know what that is, but let's look at the signs. This one doesn't have a sign, so it's positive, and this doesn't have a sign and it's positive. So our rule says that our answer, if we have an even number, we have 2 positives, then it's going to be positive. Oh, it was negatives. This is all positive, so my answer I know is going to be positive before I do any multiplying. And I would suggest that. Look at the signs first. Decide what the sign is going to be on your answer, and then multiply. It's going to be a positive 12. That one's pretty easy. Let's do a negative 3 times 4. In this case, I have 1 negative, so that's an odd number of negatives, so I know immediately I'm going to have a negative answer. Then multiply 12. Are y'all getting this? What if I have a negative 3 times a negative 4? Then I decide on the sign first. I have an even number of negatives because I have 2 negatives. That's even, 1, 2. So I know already my answer is going to be positive, then multiply. Do y'all see? Let me
My
totally
laptop froze.
mind. Let's do this one, hit it. You're going to have some similar to this on one of the worksheets. So let's say I'm going to have 2 times negative 2 times negative 3 times negative 1 times 6. Okay? Now, before you multiply, don't multiply anything. I want you to count the number of negatives. There's 1, 2, 3 negatives. 3 is odd. That means my answer is going to be negative before I even multiply. Now, some of you will need a calculator, okay, to do this. But I've got 6 times 6 is 36 times 2 is 72. After you know what the sign is going to be, use your calculator if you want. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. And 12 times 1 is 12. And 12 times 6 is 72. So find out your sign first. That's the challenge. Then you all know how to multiply. Okay? Now, your calculator, I agree. You can put every bit of this in your calculator and you can find out the answer. You can put in 2 times and you can put a -2 and a -3 and a -1. You can put that in your calculator. 2 things. First of all, on your GED test, they give you 5 questions at the first that you are not allowed to use your calculator at all before you start the rest of the test. Things like this will show up in that section because you should know how to figure out the signs. So I encourage you to not use your calculator on these. At least don't use it to find the signs. Find the sign first, then multiply the numbers. Find the sign first, then multiply the numbers. Try to do this without your calculator. This is one of the main things they may give you where you can't use your calculator at all. Mark my words. Let's do some divide. -15 divided by 5. Do the sign first. Count the negatives. 1 negative. That's odd. And so my sign is going to be negative. Now you can divide. 15 divided by 5 is 3. Ta-da. It's going to be a -3 because there's only one negative sign. -15 divided by -5. Count the negatives. 1, 2. That's even. If you have an even number of negatives, your answer is going to be positive. Then divide. Now you may see this written as -15 divided by, we're going to find out again that the line in a fraction simply means this is a division problem. Equals. So the same rules apply to multiply and divide. Count your negatives. We have only one negative. That's odd. So my answer is going to be negative. Then I take 15 divided by 5, which is 3. -3. The same holds true with our second problem here. It could look like this. Count the negatives. There are 2. 2 is an even number, and so my answer will be positive. Then divide the numbers, a +3. So you'll see your division problems written with the division and horizontally, but you could also see divide as a fraction, which means exactly the same thing. But in multiply and divide, I highly ask you, figure out what the sign's going to be first in your answer. Then divide. Okay, find the sign first. Then divide the numbers. Okay, I'm not to 42 times telling you that, but I will tell you over and over again. Now, let me look through the rest of your handouts to see if there's anything that I need to clarify before we go. Or are there any questions as I'm looking here? Tell me if there are any questions. I haven't allowed you to do much talking And Josh, I don't even know why you're not even showing up on my screen, but I know you're there. I think you are. Josh,
No, I don't think he's there.
maybe he left me. No? So there's just 5 of you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wonder where he went. Okay. I
I said
will.
integers. Ooh, I'm going back
Yeah.
to bed.
That's probably right, Sherry. Okay, let me flip through here. It looks like we've covered everything that you need to practice. Oh, there are a couple of words, and we usually hit these later, but I think you need to hear them now. Yes, we covered everything except you're going to see these 2 words. And you might as well start a vocabulary page that I'll give you one later when we get to that section. But for right now, start a little notebook page that says vocabulary, because there will be a lot of math vocabulary. And these are the first 2 words that have shown up. You may see the word product, possibly in instructions that say find the product. The product is the answer to a multiply problem. So if they say find the product, all they're telling you is the problems I'm going to give you to work are multiply. So find the answer. That's all they're doing. But product always refers to a multiplication problem. Quotient. You're going to see this on one of your pages. This is pronounced quotient, and it simply refers to the answer to a division problem. So again, you'll see this in your instructions probably, and it'll say find the quotient. All that means is you're going to be finding the answer, and all of the problems you're going to be working are division problems. Okay? Now, towards the back of this packet, at first, you're going to have practice all these pluses, all these add problems, then practice all these subtraction problems. And then you're going to have a page that mixes up add and subtract. So you have to pay close attention to whether you're adding or subtracting. Then later on, you're going to have a page that says, now do these multiplication problems, and all of them will be multiply. Then you'll have a page of division. Then you'll have a page where they're all mixed together, multiply and divide. And then towards the end, you'll have a page that mixes up add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So keep your head on straight. And remember that add and subtract have different rules than multiply and divide. Okay, may the force be with you. I love you.
I love you too.
Okay, any questions so far until you start to see your homework? What do you think? It's a lot to digest, and this you have to practice or it will go away. All this information will go away if you don't practice. Practice, practice, practice. Okay?
Okay.
Any questions?
No, I think I got it. I'll just go over my notes and I'll call Josie to see if she'll print me out those papers.
That sounds great. I'll go ahead and stay on, but I'm going to complete this recording now. And so as long as you want to stay on, I'll stay on. Everybody good?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
I love y'all.
I love you.
me too.